Morning. Welcome to the EDA meeting. Call the meeting to order. The Economic Development Authority meeting of Tuesday, February 11th. Roll call. We do have a couple members missing, but we do have a quorum. First item, 2.1, the minutes, the EDA minutes from January 14th and the January 29th, 2020.
I'll offer a
special
motion to
meeting.
approve both of those.
Second.
Motion is second. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.1, the administrative activity reports from January of 2020. Heather?
Good morning. You have the reports in your packet. I'll just point out a few highlights. Note under the Section 8 program, we did increase our numbers up to 95 vouchers on the program as of February 1st. Several of those were at Emerson Union now that that building has opened, so I had expected to see a jump in February, and we did.
Did any of those project-based vouchers be utilized as of yet?
We have someone coming in today for a voucher briefing for one of those units. That'll be our first one.
Okay.
We still have one unit that hasn't passed inspection. They were waiting for a part to get the stove hooked up. That unit has to pass inspection before I can enter into the AHAP contract, and that needs to be done before this gentleman will be able to lease up, but we expect that to be done this month, hoping to get him leased up March 1st. So if all goes well, we'll be fine. And then note under the EDA report, we did have a lot sale in the Milford Heights subdivision close during the month of January. And then under the property rehabilitation loan program, note one application was received and approved, just under $22,000. And under the Garden Terrace report, just note that there was an increase in expenses due to the fund transfer to the EDA fund that the board approved last month. That was around $107,000, so an unusual month, but that's why. And then also the LED lighting project is almost completed. There's just a few punch list items they're still working on.
Heather, can you talk about that lot sale? What did that go for?
$9,000.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And we have how many lots left?
8.
Okay. I'll offer a motion to approve the administrative activities for January 2020.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4, Public Housing Program, the EDA claims list. Heather?
I'll just point out the expenses to the city of New Ulm was higher than normal. That was due to 3 payrolls in January. And then we had another flooring for a turnover in apartment 306. Otherwise, everything's pretty routine.
I'll offer a motion to pay the claims.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5, Economic Development Authority, the federal EDA grant resolution. Chris.
All right. So this was brought to you, I think it was back in December, to do matching funds for a federal EDA grant, but it was brought to Region 9's attention that the school district can't be an applicant for the federal EDA. So we as the city have to be a co-applicant with Region 9 to get the grant for the school district. So nothing in the grant changes, with the exception of us being a co-applicant instead of a participant in the grant. The matching funds that you had previously approved still remains at $10,000. The only thing that I'm looking for today is a recommendation from the EDA to the City Council to approve applying for the grant.
This is a pretty interesting grant. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the content?
Yeah, so the school district is applying for a federal EDA grant to fund, fund the building blocks for their Career and Technical Education Center here in New Ulm. So what that'll entail is putting together the planning, developing the programs, getting the teachers certified in what they need to get certified, looking at the pro forma to see if it's even feasible, so along the lines of a feasibility study, which then potentially they can partner into a different federal EDA grant to help them build the center, or look at other avenues for private investors to help with that as well, because they'll actually have a plan and pro forma ready to go.
If I understand, the turnaround on this is not too great. I mean, they should know fairly soon if this
Yeah.
grant's been approved. Is it just in a couple months or
I would say within a month.
within a month?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
So upon that, then, if since the city's now playing a role in this, does that mean they may have to do this again, or so we may have to come back and
We may, yeah.
offer further recommendations as this process continues?
Yeah, so if the school district wants to apply or wants to go after the federal grant for building the actual facility, then we would be applying again for that grant as well, because they wouldn't be able to apply.
Would the city have to take an ownership role possibly in the building in order to qualify?
Yeah, and that's something that the school district would have to look at. Some of the parameters on that would be the city would have to own the building for 20 years, and the same function would have to be in there for 20 years. So if Jeff Bertrand retires and the new superintendent comes in and no longer wants to do it, then the city's on the hook for repaying the loan or repaying the grant. So that's something that we would have to look into. But at this time, I don't know if the school district's interested in pursuing that route at all.
Okay.
So that's what this planning grant is supposed to do, is help us get to see what those next steps are.
So I'm assuming, like, you'll come back and say, hey, this first round has been approved, and then as we go forward, we may have to do this in terms of recommendations?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
And since we've already approved this one, this is more of a formality, but if they come forward again, we're gonna get probably more information as far as what they'll be seeking?
Yep.
Okay, okay.
I'll offer a resolution then for the EDA to apply for the federal EDA grant.
I'll second.
You have a motion is,
It's a motion.
I think it's just a
It's a
motion.
motion.
Oh, just the
here,
motion,
so-
sorry.
The
I see a
council, the
resolution.
council will have to pass the resolution.
All right, so just a motion, thank you.
okay, we do have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Not all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. On to item number 5.2, EDA priorities and strategies. Prepared by Heather and presented by Chris.
Yes, so this one is a very dull action form. This is actually going to be more of a discussion, like we were going to proceed with kind of an economic development strategic plan. So what would happen is normally you'd have the consultants come in and they would actually sit down with everyone and ask what their priorities are, or what each person feels their priorities are. And from there, staff, we can put together the strategies to get us where we need to go, see if there's common threads between the different commissioners to see where the Economic Development Authority wants to go and spend their money, or look at avenues to pursue. So really, this is going to be an open discussion. You know, I know Dan had a couple ideas on what he'd kind of like to spend the see EDA kind of use their money, their funds for. I know Les, you probably have a couple ideas floating around, and we can see common threads and come up with strategies, because I know what I would like to spend the money on, but we'll see if they're in line with kind of what everyone else on the commission wants to go. And then probably I would say probably by April we can come back with some strategies and see if those fit the needs of the board. So, open discussion. Anyone can start at this point.
Well, before, Audra, didn't you have something you submitted on the pillars of economic development? Do you want to remind us of what those were?
Sure.
I put you on the spot, but
No, that's okay. It's housing.
daycare.
Nope.
No?
Chris Dalton, they're your 4 pillars.
Yeah,
Help me out.
So basically, it's housing, tourism, business retention, and business attraction are the 4 pillars
Okay. I
of
remember not reading that somewhere recently. All right, thank you.
Workforce development
workforce
instead of
Yeah,
tourism.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
You go first?
Well, sure. I think one of the things for the commissioners that were not able to attend the special meeting, you know, we were approached and asked to fund some monies for the Renew project for the aquatic center and activity center. You know, I call it Vogel Arena because I've been here that long now. So anyway, and it just when the request came, it was, hey, you know, they're asking for, you know, more money, and we had just given Park and Rec some money back in September, so we're up to like $500,000. And I think, you know, the discussion did revolve around the fact that we see some potential economic benefit in doing that, but my fear is that we had a lot of money going out the door in a fairly short period of time for these specific purposes, and I feel that community development and economic development kind of have overlap, and that I think it's very apparent in these cases where you could make a very valid argument that developing these different things in town, German Park, Herman Heights, and the Vogel Arena project do have some components of economic development. So my thought is maybe going forward, if we want to start to look at allocating or budgeting some monies that would be geared toward these types of community development projects, at least we could have some foresight in how we would approach this. My fear is that if we start spending big dollars on some of these projects, we may shortchange ourselves in some other projects. So I just want to get a wide sort of view of what is it that we want to get involved with in the short run, and then, of course, in a more longer-term basis. So that was kind of why I brought that up at the special meeting, just so we could get it on our radar and we can start talking about it as a commission, and then hopefully make a plan as it relates to community development. So that's one thing, at least on my wish list. I think number one on my wish list personally is the continued development of the Milford Heights 1. I think we've got 8 lots now, and I think we can all agree that that entire project has taken way longer than any of us would have liked. So my thinking is hey, we've recently spent $500,000 on Park and Rec projects. Why can't we take some of our own funds and get that project to the finish line and get 8 more houses built there? And so to that end, I think what we want to do is get creative and innovative, take some of our funds and make that happen. My immediate thought would be is I think what we want to look at is, in this day and age, what we're seeing is affordable housing when it comes to new construction just isn't affordable. There's just no way we can build a house that's going to meet the parameters and for somebody who is at our median income levels for our community. So when our involvement with the Housing Institute last year, I had the opportunity to sit down with the director of housing from Minnesota Housing Finance Agency, and he's really alluded to the fact that these things can only get done with gap monies to meet the differential between the cost of the new home and the affordability for your typical buyer that you're targeting in that market. So I think what we're going to need to do is sit down and have a serious conversation about if we can put some gap monies together to meet the potential needs of getting those houses built. And really that's what we were doing in the past. We were building the houses for this price and having to sell them at this price, and yes, it's a loss. You know, the political correct term is gap funding for that, but we may need to do that in the cases of these 8 houses to make it happen, and I think that that really is something we should put our focus on and get that whole project done once and for all, get those remaining 8 houses up there and call that phase 1 complete, and let the private developer do what they're doing and complete phase 2, and we're meeting hopefully some of the needs that we have for single family housing in our community. So to me, that's priority 1. What I would like to see staff do would be maybe go out with some of our existing floor plans and get a bid put together for what would it cost to build that house. I think the other thing we need to consider to keep it real is let's get a completed house, up and down, done. So we're not giving a potential homeowner a half-finished house, because that puts a real economic burden, again, on our target market. So that's gonna increase the cost, and it's probably gonna increase our gap considerations as well. But I think what we wanna do there is just get a starting point for cost, and then from there, we'll have to sit down and say, okay, here's median income. This is what a typical buyer at our 100% median or 80% median, we can kind of make a fluctuation in that gap amount. So this is what it's gonna take. And then we can come back and say, okay, this is what kind of investment we're gonna have to make in order to make this thing happen. The thing I would also recommend is we'd be done with spec houses. Let's not build it and hope they come. Let's get a valid buyer there, ready to go, and get the units on a pre-sold basis. And that takes a lot of that risk away from the commission and the EDA in order to sit here and wait for a house to sell. So that's Milford Heights. The other thing I'd like to see is us maybe do a study on Garden Terrace 3, the lot. I understand from Chris that there's going to be some remediation that's going to be needed to get the land ready for construction. I think we should move forward on that. I think there's still a great need for multifamily housing. So I would like to see us looking at, pursuing development and developers on that, and we're going to have to play a role probably in getting that site prepared for sale and building. That's probably what we're going to need to do to get that to happen as well. So there's going to be some funds we're going to need to do that. Let's figure out what that's going to be, and so we can get it budgeted for. Last thing on my list is I'm also a commissioner or a member of the NUEDC board. They've expressed interest in selling their land to the city. They're kind of getting out of the development game since they no longer have an executive director. I think they really are kind of at a loss for what they want to do next. And I think those lots and that land is a valuable asset for our community. So we might want to consider playing a role in purchasing that land so we can be involved with that further development. So that's kind of my wish list for now. I think there's some longer range things that we probably want to talk about too, but Les, I don't know if you got some things.
I'll go a little bit different direction since you covered that pretty well, Commissioner. I would move to 2 different areas. One is our continued concern about daycare in our city. 4 or 5 years ago, we tackled it a little bit. We got the city council to waive fees for new daycares opening up in our community for 1 year. We put a group of folks together that was well attended by business and community folks in New Ulm, and we were able to put together one of the biggest obstacles from hearing from the daycare people were all the mandatory trainings you have to keep your license. And we put together a day where they could get a lot of that training done on a Saturday and just knock out a whole bunch of the trainings. It also had some other educational things that were involved that day, and it worked pretty well. But we haven't done anything really since then. And for newborns especially, that becomes a major issue in our community as far as some people not coming to our town for jobs because there is no daycare for newborns or very limited daycare. As well as spots for our little toddlers. So we can't forget that priority. I know we have a new center almost open, but not quite, and I don't know if there's some little extra push we can help to get that facility up and running. But there are some things I think we can do. Might take a committee to get together to take a look at knocking down some of them barriers once again, and providing some assistance for those folks either that are already in the business so they don't leave, and also those folks who want to get into daycare. And we learned through some of our training that people aren't in daycare for 25 years like they used to be. They're in there for 4, 5, 6 years, maybe while their toddlers are growing up, and then they're getting out of the business. So we need to maybe change our marketing strategy and to make sure we fit with that new group. The second area I'm going to talk about, last week, City Councilor Mack, myself, and our city manager attended a workshop, if you want to call it that, up at the college, about the thought or the idea of making New Ulm a retirement destination. So a new concept. Would people actually move to New Ulm and to settle here based on amenities and things that we could provide for seniors? There was some talk of the mall. Could that be repurposed into senior apartments that would have some so technical that they would have sensors in the carpet that could tell relatives if somebody fell? I mean, some of the technology was really cool. But also having part of that mall where they might have a minute clinic and dental and just all kinds of services for our aging population available right on site. Would that drive new businesses to our downtown community and fill up some of our storefronts if we really focused in on this retirement destination concept? I was pretty impressed with the presentation. If people here want to hear more about this, Paul Wessel was the one that put on the presentation. He grew up in this city, moved on and did some things and is now retired back here and is willing to come and do a short presentation for the EDA if this is something we would have an interest in. And backing, we'd probably need to do a study, obviously, to see if this is something that could work in our community. I was pretty impressed with the concept that we're 90 miles away from some of the larger cities and we're kind of centralized and we are a tourism city, and it's something different, something a little different that we don't have in our area. So could we focus a portion of our funding to make this kind of thing happen? I'd like to see what the study would have to say about that. It's certainly a different concept than we thought about. So if that's something today that people would be interested in, we could easily put that on the agenda for the next meeting or two down the line. Those are probably my main two areas that I was going to talk a little bit about what Dan had, but he covered that pretty well. So I'll move it on.
Thank you. Any other comments?
I guess I was thinking back to things that, what have we done the last few years and what direction, we want to go. But compared to my first year or so on the EDA, when I was still kind of learning what the scope of what we did was and what we're doing now, I'm thankful for the projects that we have been able to work on the last few years. When I thought about those 4 pillars and, what things are we doing to help recruit businesses and, develop our workforce and things that we can do more. So I felt like we do have projects in the work to help with some of those pieces. I wasn't able to attend the special meeting, but I was thankful for the view that the commissioners had and how you handled that, I guess. I was concerned about just, being approached as the checkbook to help fund things that come up when I want us to be thoughtful about it and how it does relate to economic development. So I guess one of my things I had jotted down just thinking about this was, what more can we do now for our business owners to help, facilitate their growth and development? Workforce housing is part of it. So what you had to say about Milford Heights and finishing that kind of speaks to that. Workforce development, if we can help to get that project going with the school district and see where that goes, because I think that'd be really great for the city. And then Childcare Solutions is another thing I had down as well, that as a mother myself, I've been through it myself, and I hear about it from a lot of people that I come into contact with, that is such an issue, not just in New Ulm, but in Brown County. So, and that's just a challenge for, families starting out, and how to make those ends meet with the cost of childcare as well as just finding it. So I do think that that's an important focus too, that, once you have that in place, or if there's something more that can be done to support that area, it makes it easier for people to work and to, give back to the economy in that way too. So I guess I've enjoyed the last couple years being able to be part of some of the projects that we have funded. But it would be nice to kind of see a big picture then of, okay, maybe we kind of recap. This is how much we've put into each of these projects, and this is maybe our funding source for the year, and what can we do with this money, just kind of looking at the numbers piece of it too, bigger picture, and what we have available, so that when we get asked for these things, we really know how feasible it is for us with the finance piece of it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Yanni, just a few other comments I had, and I don't want to repeat, but going way back, I forget how long I've been on the EDA, but I, like Commissioner Brahm was on the NUEDC board, and a lot has changed. But initially coming on the board here, I was surprised at the focus of 90% housing, whatever you want to say the percent was, and the traditional economic development piece of it that I was the commercial rehab loan program, and that was about it. And obviously a lot has changed over the last 5 to 10 years in regard to the city taking on the more of the economic development, traditional economic development role. And Commissioner Brahm mentioned the housing part of it. Commissioner Schultz talked mostly about daycare. They're all intertwined of the 4 pillars: housing, workforce development, business retention, business recruiting. I'll just touch on one other area, the retention, and our concentration on our existing business. Both the expansion and retention of that existing business is so key in any business. Your cheapest growth is organic growth, what you have already, and capitalizing on that. And to me, that is so key, and it's up to us and also the city and Audra to make sure we have our ears to the ground, that we're making it, we're a community that's easy to do business with, and basically that to me is key to the existing business retention, is because it's a balancing act. Looking for new business, filling up the industrial park is will happen given time, but the singles and doubles are worth a lot, and then once in a while you get a triple and a home run, and beyond that, they're also intertwined, so very much intertwined. The child care is an issue. It is an economic development issue. Housing, all the above, they're all, like I say, intertwined. But child care, there's a lot of talk about it. We no longer have children in child care, but I do hear about a lot from staff, and I don't know, what it takes to have a child care, what do you want to say, kind of like a business startup, in regard to we have a lot of working with SBDC and other in regard to small business startups, and typically they're not child care, but one dedicated to, are you interested in child care? This is what you need to do. This is what one-stop shop or something, along with the things that have been done in regard to the training that was needed and some of the programs that Les mentioned before. And I guess that's the bulk and the end of my comments. Everything else has pretty much been covered. Audrey, you had some examples of other cities, Northfield, Fairmont, Lake City. I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on in regard to, not to put you on the spot, but
All right, I can fly with it. So, yeah, the memo was just, a commissioner had asked for some examples of what other EDAs in communities do, and what, kind of how they lead in their communities as far as these conversations. I think the topics that have all been brought up so far are very New Ulm specific. And so I think that's where this conversation is right now, is really what is needed in our community. We all have a pulse on the conversations that are happening in our community and the business climate of what's needed. I think what the purpose of this conversation is to really put some priorities down and say, when we make choices about what we're going to work on, we're also saying choices about what we're not going to work on. And so it's important to focus in, for my benefit. It's nice to know what the focus is from this group. For the rest of city staff, that's nice to know that we're kind of headed, we're going to attack these 3 things and attack them hard instead of attacking 20 things, kind of hard. So the 3 examples that I gave were just, 3 different communities, and they are also in the spot of responding to community specific needs. So, I've heard childcare a lot and housing. I think, it's been talked a lot about Milford Heights, that you want to get out from under that so that you can take on some other things. So nothing really specific on those 3. I just wanted to give more examples. And it's interesting that none of you referenced those, because I think you already have a full plate that you want to work on here. And so to take on really new things.
I forgot mine, that's why I didn't bring it up.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And
No,
it's not a
but-
judgment. I'm just saying,
No,
it's
I
interesting
highlighted
that
some things,
you
but-
already have things that you want to work
Right.
on.
But I think a couple of things is that, that I pulled out of it is that some of those other communities have a more defined plan in place, and I think that that's what our focus should be. And I think it's always, when you go to strategic planning, you've got immediate, intermediate, and long-term. So, 3 buckets, and I think that that's what we should, to me, the immediate is like a Milford Heights. The intermediate might be things like, are we gonna play a role in the redevelopment of the mall or George's Ballroom? People ask me all the time those questions. What's gonna happen downtown? What's gonna happen with the mall? What's gonna happen with George's? So I think that, to me, those are intermediate things. We don't have anything direct that we're gonna play, but we may very well need to respond to things that, as they come in. I mean, nothing would make, I think, any of us happier than if a developer came in, and your senior idea sounds awesome. That could be a wonderful repurposing of the mall if we find the right developer. But then we have to say, hey, we're here, we've got resources, the city, the EDA, we have resources to make that thing happen too. We want to play a role in that because we feel that that is a beneficial use and something that, we want to play a role in. And so that's where I look at it. And I think that that's the takeaway I had from the memo that you gave, is that some of these communities, and I think you said it very well, growing our own businesses is the best way in terms of long-term economic development. I think, a 3M or Kraft dropping out of the sky and into New Ulm is probably not very likely, but we can develop those businesses that are homegrown into those types of entities, and it's going to take our involvement in making sure they continue to succeed. But no, I meant to bring it. It's
It's
just,
okay,
it was
yeah.
sitting on my desk.
very good discussion. And I think this was needed. It
Yeah.
provides some focus. It provides some clarity in regard to how resources are allocated.
Can I bring up one last one? Kind of forgot about it a little bit. I know that the chamber has a annual youth development program. That's not the correct name, but where they talk about what they would like. And pretty much every year, they talk about if you want us to stay in the community, you have to provide us better housing. And they basically said rebuild the downtown business or buildings above the stores downtown into apartments for them. And so I've always thought about that. I'm like, gosh, there is a lot of spots downtown that are sitting there empty because it's too expensive to renovate them and to meet codes. But then I thought, well, maybe there is something there. Or there's some rehab loans, or there's something that maybe our EDA could take a look at for as far as, workforce development and keeping some of our graduates in our community, or that they come back to our community and they want to live downtown. That's what they were all telling us. So, I mean, every time they've met, they've said, we'd like to live downtown. But there's very few places that they could actually do that because they don't meet codes. So is there something we could develop in that retrospect to make that happen? So I'd like to see that maybe make at least part of the list for future discussion. So.
Well, let me ask you guys, have you gotten enough feedback? Do you think?
Is that kind of what you're looking for?
Yes, because I think most of the things that the group has said, I already have ideas of what to do to help do some of that stuff. So again, the things that I've been working on in my brain aren't too far off of what the EDA really wants to do at the end of the day. So, I mean, we can start bringing forward some strategies. I mean, it's probably as early as the next meeting.
Wonderful.
Just kind of jot them down and say, is this direction everyone wants to go? I mean, I can just name off just a couple really quick that, see if they're even worth doing. So, part of the housing issue, again, some of the lower hanging fruit, a single family rehab loan at some point, either geared towards the elderly community so they can fix their house and the bones are ready to go, they can sell it, so then a new family coming in doesn't have to really do those repairs, or the other side doing first-time home buyers where you get a 50% kind of reduction over 5 years, so you only have to pay 50% of the loan back. But again, we can have a discussion on that. For downtown, looking at tax abatement for the properties down there, so probably a 50% over 5 years, but you can look at 100% depending on the level of investment to help that go in there. Some of the other things, that we're currently working on that will actually help businesses, kind of a 10-step guide to setting up shop, doing some simple fact sheets. So again, information is easily available to everyone. Looking at potentially doing, and this kind of ties into your the EDA lot or the EDC lots, shovel-ready lot certification. So again, when a developer comes in, wants to do something, or a business comes in, those lots are shovel-ready. Because again, as they sit right now, they're not shovel-ready. When you have to rent out a $30,000 piece of equipment to level it out, definitely not shovel-ready. So looking at things like that. Daycare, again, Audra's been working on some stuff, but potentially bringing forward to this group, really just finding a building, rehabbing it, us doing the heavy lifting, all the capital improvements, and then finding a third party to come in and lease it back from us. I think it's probably going to the easiest way for us to help that daycare issue. We've given money, again, to the daycare that's still not open yet, give them a $35,000 loan. They're still not open. We've looked at small business grants, and every little bit helps, but it's, I think, to really solve that issue or help that issue, I think we, as the city and the EDA, need to really looking at a potential building and rehabbing that and have some serious discussions about it. And then working with local providers to see if they want to expand in that and take that over. The CCRC, if the mall doesn't work out as a location, looking at George's Ballroom, it's kind of the same footprint that they would be looking for, still in close proximity to downtown, and more than likely it's probably going to get demolished, but we'll see. And then, Garden Terrace 3, Looking at that lot right there, that's about a $200,000 to $300,000 project to remediate that ground, but we'd have to do some soil borings first to make sure that's okay, what that's going to look at. And then, yeah, just plugging away at Milford Heights. And was talking to Audra and Heather that we should start building houses at some point. If we can't, probably within this year, sell any of the lots, really look at building them ourselves, much like you said, and just taking it as a loss, to get the affordable housing component.
It's not going to get any better the longer we wait.
Yeah.
So I think that's the takeaway from Milford 1 is that let's bite the bullet, let's get them done, and let's move on. And and this is a long-term thing. When it comes to housing and single-family housing, I want us to be more of a resource.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want us to be a direct builder and developer and competing with the private entities out there, but I want us to be a resource if we can provide, even infrastructure, loans, or something low interest to get. I think the trend is to get more of those lots developed with that already in place, and they do it privately instead of looking for public bonding. And maybe that's that's a role we can play going forward too. But that's a discussion for another day.
Yep.
But we can. I think it's one of those things. It's like, what role do we want to play in these various pillars? And I think our biggest thing, is going to be a resource, and then we can leverage our funds with maybe funds from other sources and say, hey, we can get these projects completed.
Yep.
So
Totally agree. Yeah.
great.
Well, that was a good discussion, and I think we had a lot of takeaways. So we can bring back some strategies probably as early as next month. Just kind of hammer out some of the details and let you guys decide if the strategies are.
Yeah, I
worth
certainly would
pursuing.
like a little more discussion on. I'm not sure I'm quite as convinced as you are about getting back into the building process, since I sat through that for how many years.
Oh,
and
I know.
we didn't do very
Again,
well.
I think there's different approaches
Exactly.
we can take.
We'd have to talk about the
Yeah,
approach.
Let's
but-
pre-sell and let's not let's push on that and not be a spec builder and
or have a fire sale and sell the lots and be done.
yeah, that could be a strategy too.
We could be out of it in 30 days if we sold those lots for
Yep.
probably less than we'd make. Perfect. Less than we'd lose building.
That'll work.
But that's worth discussion.
Okay, thanks, everybody. And Audra, I guess I liked your comment that, how did you put it? Basically, it's deciding what we want to do, and as important as what we do not want to do is just as important, and because we can't do it all.
Right.
So I wonder, this is probably the part, do we want that, if people have an interest in this retirement destination concept, would we want that individual to come and do a 15, 20-minute presentation to hear what they have to say or not? I mean, it doesn't.
That, or I can ask him for the executive summary that he was supposed to provide us, and then email that to the group, and then they can.
Was this individual just a developer that they
No.
come in and do this? Just somebody like a planner that sees these as a
facilitator.
facilitator?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think what you said when it comes to providing services for seniors, if with
Retirement destination, which is different than
Yeah.
providing just for
Yeah.
our local people.
Right.
This would be the concept of bringing people into our community to retire here.
Right, but with all those immediate services right at their disposal, I think
Correct.
is the key factor to making something like that successful.
And might bring in businesses into our downtown that we don't
Absolutely.
really have now that would cater to that population. I did speak with him, and I asked him, I said, if the EDA wanted a 15 or 20-minute presentation, is this something that you could do? And he said, yeah, absolutely, he could. So do you want the retirement proposal first, or would you rather have him present it to have more knowledge? I don't,
Either way.
I think the proposal first.
get the proposal first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. I'll
Yeah,
follow
and he
up.
said he'd provide that.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll get that from him.
I think it's worth
Okay.
taking a look at.
Thank you, everybody, for input. So we know action to be taken on that, just discussion.
Yep, just discussion.
Okay. So moving on to item number 6, which is the Economic Development System Manager's Activity Report. Audra?
Sure. I'll just add a couple things to the report that's in your packet. The Small Business Development Center days at City Hall are going very well. We have planned, we're going to stick with the 2 days every month. We're going to stick with the first and third Tuesdays. Those seem to be working well. So we planned out the rest of the year and have gotten that approved with our consultant, Wendy Anderson, and their main office. One of the things we did is we sent a flyer to financial institutions recommending that these they can refer clients or business clients to these activities. I'm just trying to reach out and make sure that lenders and commercial bankers are really involved in their clients' businesses, and if they think that these services would be helpful, we want to make sure that they feel comfortable referring people. So we worked on that. We had the first consulting cafe, which is where small business people can come in and sit with one of the consultants at no charge. It's a real informal introduction to the services of the Small Business Development Center. And we had a very nice turnout on Saturday at the library, which works to use a city facility for something like this, once I figured out how to make the coffee. But we had a good turnout and a really nice, we had 3 consultants come. We had 7 entrepreneurs show up. And they had a really, we didn't get out of there until 12 when we were supposed to be out of there by 11:30. So there was some good conversation there. And also Representative Torkelson stopped by, so he got a chance to see what we were doing there and was impressed. So that's good.
So Audrey, were they current people that want to develop businesses or current business owners? Or a little of both?
Couple were side ventures,
Okay.
People who have full-time jobs, in manufacturing or whatever, and are
Yep.
doing side ventures. And then some were career change. They were in
Okay.
something, but were
Just
looking
curious.
to change careers. So,
Thank you.
Yep. And then I did have a discussion with Representative Torkelson about the impact of childcare and the lack of it in our community. According to the 2018 SMIF study, we are 110 spots short in our community. So we talked about, there's a lot of different ways to attack that. And, some of, as Chris alluded to, some of the work that I have is, simply how do you help in-home providers? How do you help centers? How do you help employees who need the care? And then, what's the role of private businesses who are needing to use childcare almost as a recruiting tool because it is working against them at this point. So that was a good conversation. So that's where we're at. Any questions for my work?
Do you know how many at the 2-day sessions for the city people came?
Wendy is tracking all of those visits, so we will in a couple of months, once
Okay.
we have a little bit more under our belt, we'll bring a report to you, but she is tracking the clients and also kind of the topics that are being covered, which, we've received from SPDC before. But what's great is there's a nice steady stream of people coming into City Hall. She sets her own calendar, so she's filling her time here with clients she either already has or who are coming through the SBDC website. So people are going through the website and requesting meetings in New Ulm. So she's busy. And then she's also been, we had a session where she met with city staff. So that, like in community development, and Heather and Chris, we all kind of sat with her so that she could tell us a little bit more about what her specialties are, and that she's a resource here for us too, which was great.
And Audra, the consulting cafes is also facilitated by
Yes,
SBDC?
SBDC, that's
Okay.
correct. And we will have 4 of those in the course of the year as part of the agreement. So this is the first one, and it was good.
If I remember, Audra, 6 months, March would be our retail strategies report. So we'll have that next month as well,
Sounds good?
right?
Sure.
Yes.
I think I got my timing right on that.
Okay, if there's no other discussion, thank you, Audra.
Mhm.
I'll
Lovely.
offer a motion to accept the report.
I'll second.
A motion is second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. No further business. Meeting adjourned.